Welcome back to another mix comparison on the Working Audio Tools podcast, the home of all things mixing and mastering, where we dissect mixes and constructively critique mixes that Paul and I are working on. In this season, season 10, we are focusing on working on tracks where we can get the artist and the producer onto the podcast. If you haven't listened to the episode with Marv Sowell, that's a great, insightful episode, and first of many that we have for this season. This week is no different. We have a track which is from a friend of mine called Bobby Bonev, or he's I Am Mason Blue on Instagram, and he forms one half of the Sonictron duo. This track was produced and co-written by Bobby, and the other half of Sonictron is Gloria, who is singing on the track, and the track is Mia Piace La Moda, which means something like I like fashion.
Is that what it is?
That's the one. That's to refer to my email. And the interesting thing about this song is this was featured on the Kardashians' latest series on Hulu, latest season, on the Hulu channel. So this track has been out and has been heard by millions of people. So there's quite a high benchmark, but I was quite excited to get hold of this track. How did you get on with this? Because this threw up some interesting dilemmas and a very different approach to the country, rock, pop stuff that we're used to mixing.
So first off, the difficulty was that I had the mastered version because I didn't have the client's rough, so I downloaded the mastered version from Apple Music. So I was referencing that, did a mix, had it to like around, whatever, minus 7.3 or whatever LUFS that they had it. And then Ed was like, yeah, what about the rough? I was like, I've got the master. I was like, yeah, let's not get it to the master. Let's try and get it. So I had to bring it back. And so then I did a hybrid mix. So I was going from the master to the client's reference because the two are very different to my ears. Like it's almost, it doesn't even sound like it's a master. It sounds like somebody else has mixed it. What did you think? Did you think that it was just the master was overly processed, like way different to what the mix was, or did you think it was a different mix and master?
I know what you mean. So, for example, the mix, I believe this is the mix down that went to mastering, but don't quote me on that. We'll have to ask Bobby next week when he's on the show. But I believe that was what went to mastering, and that was at minus 22 LUFS, which for a reference mix, it was like, I'm pretty sure I can get louder than that.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, the final master was quite different, a lot more weight in the low end and control of the top end, and I think the master came out quite nicely. Paul worked on the master, or against the master first, and I'd forgotten to tell him that the rough was in the drive, and I'd worked against the reference mix, and then heard the master later, and I was like, okay, right. So I think we've both had a case of we've gone for one and the other, and then met in the middle, at least somehow, to try and honor the reference. But there were a couple of things on this that I liked. One, just the track is insane. There's so much going on and moving and coming in and out, and layers coming up and down, forward and back, and popping up. And there was a lot to focus on. I had to go through every single section and even like half verses because things were changing halfway through the verse, and A-B them with the reference and be like, right, cool, kept doing that. So I feel like I may have missed something compared to the reference because there was just so much to keep your ear engaged or in our case kind of distract us from what we were doing.
Yeah.
But the vocal tuning was good. I like the fact that there was no need for panning because this track was properly produced by Bobby and everything's just in its place. And it was interesting, other than the vocals, not working with any live instruments, just programmed stuff, or at least played stuff. They weren't, we weren't talking acoustic guitars, electric guitars, and live drums. So that was kind of a relief. So on the one hand, it was easier than other stuff we've done, but it was also a fresh challenge. For example, listening to the rough mix, which had a lot less low end than the mastered version, I wanted to bring some of that in and also bring in some analog warmth and weight, but I knew I needed to be careful bringing analog gear on the low end because you can get that low end smeariness and lose the punch and the tightness of it. So I was conscious of that while I was going through it, and the viewers can decide whether I got that right or not. What were the challenges for you? What did you enjoy about it?
What I find interesting the most is that you felt that the master had more low end than the rough, because if you put the master and the rough into expose, the rough has more low end. And to my ears, there is more low end in the rough than the master.
Maybe it definitely felt more balanced, but I noticed that in expose as well and thought that's interesting because that's not quite how I'm perceiving it.
Which is interesting because obviously that's what I heard different. So I heard more of the thing is where the reference mix, the rough mix, was that the bass was very prominent and it was like a big part of the track. Where when I listened to the master, and because you can see it in expose as well, but that was before I'd even chucked them into expose. It basically told me like what I was hearing, and I could see that there was at least like a dB and a half difference.
Yeah, so I think I'm talking about like kind of low, below 100 hertz, but a lot of that bass lead part is very middly. It's a lot of mid-range information in that.
It's the difficult thing with that bass is that you have to low pass it a very, very specific way. If you don't low pass it, you're going to allow all of this synth kind of distortion that's like in the track itself. And what they've done is they've low passed it to a certain point, and that's quite difficult. I would have just rather they printed the bass. I was a little bit annoyed at that because I felt that what I had to do at the bass was very, very different, and I think what you did to the bass was very different as well. I think all basses sound different. The master sounds different than the rough. Mine sounds different. Yours sounds different. So I would have rather that you would have just printed the bass processed as a stem, because I feel that there's been a big change to the bass, and as a mixer, it was quite difficult to try and figure out what have you done, because to my ears, I could listen to my mix and your mix, and his bass. And the masters, the bass does this weird thing where it's like almost like a whoosh in the bass, and I could not recreate that. And I heard that yours didn't do the same either. So
I know what you mean.
They've done something to it, and I was like, that's kind of put me at a bit of a limitation, because I've not got whatever processing you've got on that, and I can't really re-engineer it. So that was a little bit difficult. But I think for me, what both of us were fighting with was, where should the bass sit, and how loud should the bass sit, and how prominent should the bass sit? Because if you listen to the rough, you'll get what Ed's got, where I did kind of a little bit more what the master did. But again, I think I've went a little bit too far. But yeah, the bass was the most difficult thing for me. But again, when I was listening to the mix, I was hearing all the elements. I was in the Paul third, right, so that's there, and that's there, and that's that loud, and that sits there, and that sits there, and maybe that can do a little bit of depth, and maybe that, and that. So it was, the parts of it were kind of a little bit of a struggle, but I didn't do a lot of processing. The most time I spent was on that bass. Honestly, that bass was just killing me, because I was listening to the master and the rough, and the two of them just weren't coinciding to me. So I basically tried to kind of sit in the middle and do what kind of I thought would maybe work a bit better. How did you feel about that bass? Did you spend a lot of time on it, or was there other elements that you spent more time on?
Yeah, there was a very distinct sound that Bobby's captured, which I couldn't reverse engineer either. I ended up getting as close as I could with it, with some harmonics in Spectre at about 300, 400, 500 hertz and quite middly. But yeah, there's some great processing going on it, and when we get him on the show next week, we can pick his brains about that. What struck me was about a lot of the things in the mix when I got into it. When I first listened to it, I thought, okay, it's pretty straightforward, can probably add some kick and punch to the drums. And then when I started listening to it, and the dry stems that we got, nothing was processed. It was a case of, there's been a lot of widening on a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
And that I think would suit your way of mixing more.
Yeah.
Because you're Mr. Wide. Insert, no.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Whereas I seem to fit into a bit more of a monocentric kick, bass, drums down the middle, vocals down the middle.
You're more of a tight package. That's what I would say.
I'm filtering, man. I'm.
Fucking hell, we'll get cancelled fucking soon, eh? Soon enough.
I thought we'd get cancelled a few episodes ago.
Okay, I know.
Sorry, listeners, we digress. Moving swiftly on. So for reference, we will play you the reference mix that we had, which I believe is the mix down that went to mastering. Again, not quite sure. Let's have a listen to that so you knew what we were going against.
Non importa chi sei, basta che abbia cash. Mi piace la moda, la 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 la. Dior, cavalli, Prada, la 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 la. Gucci, glam, tacchi, via, ciao. Sono arrivata, miau. Puro lusso, sei mio. Bling bling bling, non importa cosa qui cacci. È un nuovo ritmo click click click. Dalla fotocamera era preparare carpet. E avanti il mio target. Non mi fermerai. It's all mine. Piace la moda.
If you don't have an in-house mastering engineer like we're fortunate enough to have with Marcel at Act2 Make with the Working Audio Tools, DistroKid have you covered. For just $99 a year, you can buy unlimited mastering for all of your tracks in tandem with unlimited releases via DistroKid. Mixair from DistroKid uses AI technology to measure the EQ and the dynamics of your track and then present you with numerous options to tweak and customize your master. You can flip between the original and the generic mastered option.
Blame it on the whiskey. Blame it on the bad weed.
So instantly we can hear that's making the track louder, and it's also slightly flattening the EQ, bringing in a little bit more of the mid-range and of course the top end. We can adjust the intensity, which is how much compression and limiting is being applied to the track.
Blame it on the only thing you've ever seen. Run and tell your mother. Blame it on your brother.
I think somewhere in the middle works for this track. And the EQ options are self-explanatory. We can make the track effectively duller or brighter.
Just ain't right. All you do is lie. All you do is try to deny. All you do is lie. Even when you know it just ain't right. All you do is lie.
Download your mastered track and release it as easily as you do all of your other unlimited uploads. Get 30% off your DistroKid subscription using the Working Audio Tools VIP link below. So upon hearing the reference mix, what did you feel needed changing, or how did you feel you could improve it from where it was?
I felt the bass was maybe a little bit, a little bit muddy, and it was maybe like a little bit too prominent, a little bit. And I felt like it was a little bit soft sounding. So I knew his intention. I just felt that overall I can maybe just add a little bit more energy to it. Certainly, like the kick was maybe a little bit soft in places. So it was just for me, bring back the bass energy, allow the vocal to come forward, and then try and add depth. I don't think that there was a lot of depth in the mix, and that's just my sound. Especially over the past 6 months, I'm somebody who tries to look left and right, so wide, and front and back. So every one of my mixes, I always want to have an element of width and an element of front and back. And so that way you get this kind of element of a really kind of deep mix where you kind of feel like you're in the mix. That doesn't always work. But it's something that I've kind of niched down on a little bit because I think that's what I do best. I think that's when I try and do very forward sounding mixes, sometimes I can make things sound a bit overly harsh. But again, the client might be like, no, what? Bobby might be like, nah, that's not what I wanted. It's an easy fix, you know what I mean? But yeah, for me, I felt like I was already wide, but I just felt like I'd maybe do with a little bit more punch, a little bit, make it a little bit less softer sounding, and add a little bit of depth to it, and just bring back the bass. That was what I felt. I felt the bass energy was kind of just kind of overtaking the track a little bit. What did you feel when you listened to his?
Yeah, I'd agree. I felt there could be more weight to the kick and punch to the kick, and the bass was very prominent. But I took that as the kind of
Intention,
the guidepost for the, and the intention of the track.
Yeah.
Exactly, good word. I felt the reference was quite top end heavy.
Yeah.
But I thought there was enough depth in it, and I actually thought, okay, there's quite a lot of little bits of reverb going on, but I know you took that and you ran with that idea, didn't you?
Oh, no, it was annoying, because again, I would have rather he printed that, because I then had to try and recreate it. So there's a bit, it's like, it's like whatever it is, like a breathy thing in the back, and it's quite important. So I then had to try and reverse engineer the verb and get the decay in the tail right to kind of try and match it and stuff. So yeah, that was a little bit of a challenge, but I suppose that's what's part of mixing. But there is a lot of stuff in hindsight I would have rather Bobby just printed it, like what we did with Marv with his guitars. It's really, really important, so just fucking send us it and we could pop it in the mix.
Yeah, that was something I didn't action on this track, and we didn't necessarily communicate about. But so for those of you wanting to hear the mastered version, that is available out online. We will leave a link in the description so you can compare what you've just heard, which was the reference mix that we had, and the final master. The other thing in the reference mix was the vocals seemed very saturated. Did they seem that way to you?
Yeah, what you'll definitely hear in my mix when you hear it is that my mix as a whole is, in certain elements, is a lot cleaner. Like I always go for a cleaner sound.
Yeah, I went for cleaner as well. Personal preference. I mean, but that's the kind of thing you can take away or you can add in later if Bobby said, you know what, saturate those puppies and get on with it. I feel like, cool, not a problem. All right, so who should we listen to first?
No, what I think we should go with Ed's first, because I think Ed's mix sticks truer to the intention, because I think it'll make more sense as you've just heard Bobby's, because I think that if you hear mine, it might maybe be a little bit of a distraction, but I think Ed sticks a little bit more to the intention for me. So let's listen to Ed's, and then I'll give like my feedback.
Bear in mind, Paul has been trained by the assassin of mixed feedback.
And I did get a thumbs up from him, which is good. But we'll see. We'll see. We know what the internet's about. Anytime I think my mix is decent, fucking the internet tells me otherwise. But let's listen to Ed's mix of. I'm not going to say it because I
go on, say it with a Scottish accent.
What is it? Summon La Moda, isn't it? Summon fucking La Moda. Let's listen
I think it's Mi Piace La Moda, which is obviously a terrible northern version.
Le Piace La Moda, yeah. Let's listen to the track. La Pace, La Ponta, whatever. Eda, let's do it.
I'm so sorry, Bobby. We're crucifying this.
Yeah, sorry, Bobby. Right, cool. Let's listen to Ed's mix.
Non importa chi sei, basta che abbia cash. Mi piace la moda, la 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 la. Dior, cavalli, Prada, la 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 la. Gucci, glam, tacchi, via, ciao. Sono arrivata, miau. Puro lusso, sei mio. Bling bling bling, non importa costo, Pikachu. È il nuovo ritmo che clicchi. Dalla fotocamera era. Prepara le carpe. Diamanti il mio target. Non mi fermerai. It's all mine. Mi piace la moda. Dior, cavalli, Prada. Milano solo per me. Poi mi tengo tutto io per me. Sono la star. Prepara le carpe. Diamanti il mio target. Non mi fermerai. It's so mine. Mi piace la moda. La 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 la. Dior, cavalli, Prada. La 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 la. Sfilano solo per me. Poi mi tengo tutto io per me. Bling a tutto spiano. La 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 la. VIP ci siamo. La 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 la. Seta sulla pelle. Come le modelle.
Right, so I do have my phone of notes.
Oh, that's a long list.
It is a little bit because
Just when I thought I was making progress.
it's because the intention's so different. So this is where see right now, this is all taste. This one right here is all about taste and very subjective. So me and Ed will probably disagree on a lot of points because the intention's different. However, the mix is fine, mate. Right? The mix is good. There isn't anything glaring to me where it's like, oh, like yeah, that's got a bad tilt, or that's a bad mix. This is all just going to be taste in terms of like you'll hear it when you hear my mix. That's why I wanted to do Ed's first, because you'll hear kind of the reason why I've done certain things. By the way, me and Ed genuinely didn't listen to each other's mixes until after we'd finished. I just listened to Ed's mix like half an hour ago. It's just for anybody going, yeah, but you listened to Ed's first, so you were able to do that and you had an upper hand. No, I didn't.
Yeah, not this week.
Okay, so let's think about the positives that I heard in Ed's mix. Now, what I thought Ed done really well was great feel and energy, something that you did better than me, and I think you'll always do better than me because you've got that drummer's instinct in you. I think overall you really get a good feel of the dynamics of the track, and it punches you. You know what I mean? It's got a ferociousness to it. It's visceral. I'd say it's a very visceral mix.
That's interesting, because that was something I felt I didn't do very well on this one.
Well, when I was listening to mine and yours back and forth, I could hear a difference. It's an aggressive sounding mix for me, especially compared to mine. It's definitely aggressive compared to mine. Very centre focused, like extremely centre focused. But I know that I was an intention at Ed's. You nailed the kick. That's for me the one thing that you did better than me, hands down, in my opinion. When I'm listening on the MX4s are telling me that you got the kick right. You really got this, like, there's weight to it, but it's almost got a knock to it at the same time, where there's like a solidity to the kick. That's something that you got much better than mine. So again, I don't know what you did there. I mean, did you do anything different there to get that kind of knock of the kick?
I did something very different to any other kick drum I've EQ'd on that one.
I thought so.
Which was to boost, I think, 800, 1K, and 2K.
Right, so it's all upper
and
mids.
Those are where that kind of knocky frequencies of a kick are.
Yeah, I think you did that right. I genuinely do think like that was maybe the softness in the kick in the rough, and that's
or was
what
it 1K, 2K, and 4K?
It's upper mids. Anyway, you're adding in like upper mids. So yeah, I thought you did that really, really well. And it's got, again, it kind of just sits and just punches all the way through it. However, with it being centre focused, I do feel it's a little bit cluttered and lacks depth and separation. It feels a little bit claustrophobic to me. But when you hear my mix, you're going to be like, oh, I see why Paul would say that. I just feel like certain things are buried. Like the claps to me are buried. The reverby, like backing vocals are fighting. I think the vocals are fighting against the bass. The instruments are fighting against the aggressiveness of the bass. I think you've like did such a job to make the bass such a focal point of the song, which I can tell was the intention of the ref for me. So I think probably the client is probably going to prefer that. But I do feel that the upper mid-range and the instruments and the claps, and it's like because there's so much aggressiveness and upper mid-range in the bass, because it's a bass synth, it's just fighting. Like everything else is trying to fight to get past that. And I think that's the difficulty. That's why when you listen to my mix, you'll hear that my bass is it's weird because if you look in exposed, me and Ed's basses are like basically like at the same level, but the perception is different because you've made your bass dim the middle. It's very dim the middle, very prominent, very big.
Yes.
Which is obviously something that I could hear in the rough, but I just felt it was kind of distracting for me. Even like, again, there's I call it a machine gun snare. It's like, there's a go. I feel like that's a little bit buried, where when I was listening to the ref, I could hear he had it quite prominent. So when I was doing the ref, I was like, right, that's how loud he's got that. How loud is that in the master? And I was going through the two of them going, right, okay, that's how loud that needs to go. And that needs to be audible, so that needs to move out the way and stuff like that.
That's one of those details that I remember checking, thinking, right, okay, how have they EQ'd that? Okay, they've gone for that sound, right, I can get that, but I want to tweak it slightly so it's more how I would do it. And then I probably forgot it was there and didn't pay attention to listening to it again for the rest of the mix. And it may have got buried. That's one of the little details, because there's so many details like that. It's incredible production from an effort and attention to detail point of view that I may have missed that.
I think this isn't like something that Ed's done wrong. What I feel like is when you do a mix like this, it's a bit of give and take. For you to have that big bass sound and that big aggressive bass sound, the prominent bass sound, and that amount of punch and dynamics and forwardness, it's very difficult for other things to poke through that. And I think that it's kind of a limitation sometimes, where it's like you'll hear in minds that it's like I've had to kind of lay back on the aggressiveness and the forwardness and as much as of the energy. So I kind of feel like maybe your mix, if it had a little bit of a middle ground, I kind of feel like maybe you could have backed off it a little bit and allowed other elements to kind of get a place in the mix. I don't know what you would do with that. I don't know if it's just panning or, I mean, what was your panning like? Was it like an LCR-ish mix, or would you quite like direct?
Panning was pulled the files in, everything was stereo, hard left and right, didn't touch a thing. Okay,
so I took a slightly different approach from that. But again, maybe that's where everything's kind of folding on top of each other a little bit.
Because there was subtle panning in the stereo files, so I figured that was the intention. Leave it, and most of it seemed to line up to the rough, but you would have definitely paid more attention to that than I would have.
Always do. Now, the hats are going to be what is, I think, a big debate in the comments. The hats were difficult for me because what you've done is you've made them forward, very toppy, but not overly toppy, by the way. It's not bad. I just feel like they're a little bit too prominent for my liking, and I struggled with the hats because when I was going from the master to the ref, I felt like the hi-hats were they were different in their energy, and so I placed them further back. I done the Jason Joshua thing that he talks about, because the thing is with the hats is because what I kind of feel like they've done is they are kind of taking up the top end of the mix. I don't know if he did that intentionally, but it feels like the vocal doesn't take up the top end. The hats take up the top end of the mix. But by doing that, it kind of feels like the vocal, it's like clashing against the vocal a little bit, where my attention is like taken to the hi-hats a lot, where it'll be like, right, vocal, bass, hi-hats. You know what I mean? It's like a little bit disjointed, where I'm sitting there going, what is taking my attention right now? You know what I mean? But I think that there's parts of the mix that make sense to me because you've had the intention to say, no, you're going to win that battle. But the elements that win the battle for me would maybe just a little bit distracting. But I'm very sensitive to top end. So whenever somebody has prominent hi-hats in a mix, it kind of I pick up on them. But they are very integral. The thing is with the hi-hats is that they are very integral to the beat of the song, the groove of the song. So you've not done a bad job. You've not. I just kind of felt that maybe the nibby needed to sit back a little bit. But again, that's definitely a taste thing, because I was struggling going from the ref to see, has he got it sat back? Has he got it forward? Where, actually, no, I tell a lie. I'm talking absolute bullshit because things are coming back to me. He did have his hats loud, and he had them too loud in the ref, for my opinion. I thought the hats were like, whoa, this is really distracting. The hats are too loud. So I do remember that. And I remember in the master, it sounded like to me that the hats sat further back in the master than the ref. So I don't know what he did, if he compressed the top end or something like that, maybe used a multiband compressor. So yeah, I sat my hats a little bit back because I think he had them a little bit too loud in the ref. Then the last thing is, I don't know if because you've limited your mix a lot more than mine, I think there's elements of the mix that's maybe a bit too distorted, and it's verging slightly, maybe just slightly a little bit harsh, but that's the counterbalance of getting energy. You need the mid-range and you need that aggression to give you the aggression and to give you that kind of energy. So it's like, I think you got it just on the cusp. I think on the ref and especially on the master, there's parts of the master where I'm like, oh, geez, that's a little bit, especially in the chorus where it's like I struggled with those fucking trumpets or whatever that are, the brass. Because it's like, in the master, it's very bright, like, and very sharp. And I was like, that's a little bit distracting as well. And, you know what I mean? So I think the brass you did a good job on. I think that it's not as harsh, but you still got the top end. But there's just elements of it, and I don't know if it's because you've pushed it to like, I mean, what was it, your mix? Was it -9 that ended up at?
No, I think it's coming in at -7.6.
Jesus, right, there you go then. Like, I think that's
which was an accident. I lost track of where I was going with that, and then I did start hearing the distortion you're referring to, and it was like, okay, well, if I can hear it, that means it's prominent. You know,
yeah,
my hearing versus yours. So I took a few elements back, and then it seemed to alleviate. But yeah, interestingly, I took a video of the analog gear in action as I was bouncing that last version, going through the Amphions in the room, and I could hear something through the phone speakers on playback. So the phone was obviously recording something, which is a new technique for referencing your mix. Play it through speakers, record it on your phone, play it back, and it'll tell you a whole world of information you probably don't need to know.
Yeah, but I think it's just on the cusp for me. I think, look, if you listen to my mix isn't limited anywhere near as much. I got the mix to where I thought it sounded its best, clean-wise, and it wasn't kind of like starting to fall apart. I think if you were to back that shit off and maybe do it to -9, -10, I think I wouldn't get that amount of distortion that's kind of creeping in.
It got away from me a little bit, I have to admit, on this one. And but then I was so balls deep into the mix, I was like, oh, well, it is what it is now.
Yeah, but I think what you have done well, though,
I've done.
What you have done well is that you've still managed to get that punch, even though it's like obviously starting to flatline a little bit. You've still managed to get the energy, and you've still managed to keep that aggressiveness in there, which is a good thing, you know what I mean? Because you've got the perceived loudness. It's just, I think that again, everything being a compromise with that perceived loudness, because it is, you do perceive it louder than mine. Like even when you're in Exposed and you're trying to do the loudness match thing. Yours is perceived louder than mine, but again, I think it's verging on, or maybe a little bit too harsh in places, and I can hear the distortion, and I could pick it up, and I'm just like, But then again, you know, that perceived loudness can give you that feeling of, yeah, this is fucking great, you know what I mean? And you get into it. So it's a hard balance. It's a very, very difficult balance of taste to try and balance out.
What we've learned is only the internet is right on these things.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know genuinely what people are going to say, because some people listen on TV, some people listen on coloured systems, some people listen on speakers, some people listen on fucking, you know, the cheap earbuds when they're on the bus if they're going to work in the morning. So
I think the test for me will be listening on my laptop speakers.
Yeah,
that's the ultimate litmus test. If a mix passes that, you've nailed it.
Yeah, because see, when I listen to the master and the ref, especially I think the master on my MacBook, it's an M1 MacBook Pro, I was hearing the bass distorting the MacBook Pro speakers. The bass was sounding too aggressive in the MacBook Pro speakers, and I was like, the MacBook Pro speakers are pretty good. And I was like, this is sounding a bit overlay.
I heard that on my phone, actually. And then I thought that mine seemed to translate quite well to the phone compared to the rough mix and the master.
Yeah.
But everyone's got a different phone as well.
I know, honestly, I just got a new phone this week. I've still, honestly, see, the problem with a phone is that, like, I forgot how much of a pain it is to transfer everything now, especially because so much of my world now is on this fucking phone. Still Android. I know it's still China. It was funny. I was like, I'll never get a Chinese phone again. And then they were like, yeah, so there's the new brand called Honor. And they basically got a really good camera and stuff. I was like, yeah, just fucking stick us with that. So yeah, but that's got a much better phone speaker. And it's in stereo. Oh my God, like no more fucking mono on this as well.
Does it do the mono thing to stereo?
Yeah, I think it does. I think I tried it. I was like, oh, there you go.
So the new iPhone 16, I don't think does that anymore.
Okay.
My old iPhone used to be mono like that, stereo like that. This is just stereo. Kind of sounds immersive.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Anyway, let's move on to your mix.
That you are going to hear right now, my feedback notes are going to make absolute sense when you hear my mix. Because you're going to be like, okay, I can actually hear what Paul like did differently, and everything's kind of it really should click into place for you. So you're going to hear exactly like what I was looking for in Ed's mix in mine. But I think what will be fascinating is to hear Ed's opinion on that and kind of get that counter feedback as well. So let's listen to my mix of whatever this song is called. I'm not about to butcher it again. I'm not doing it again. I'm not doing another Italian accent. I'm not doing it.
Non importa chi sei, basta che abbia cash. Mi piace la moda, la 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 la. Dior, cavalli, Prada, la 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 la. Gucci, glam, tacchi, via, ciao. Sono arrivata, miau. Puro lusso, sei mio. Bling bling bling. Non mi importa costo qui cacci. Il nuovo ritmo click click click. Dalla fotocamera era preparare carpet. Diamanti il mio target. Non mi fermerai. It's all mine. Mi piace la moda. Dior, cavalli, Prada. Sfilano solo per me. Poi mi tengo tutto io per me. Sono la star. Preparare carpet. Diamanti il mio target. Non mi fermerai. It's so mine. Mi piace la moda. La 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 la. Dior, cavalli, Prada. La 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 la. Sfilano solo per me. Poi mi tengo tutto io per me. Bling a tutto spiano. La 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 la.
All right, that was Paul Third's mix of Mi Piace la Moda by Sonictron. And we are going to be getting the producer and one of the writers of this track on next week to give us his feedback. And like the Marv episode, we're going to go away and do one round of mix revision notes, I think is the plan. I'm terrified how that's going to go. But moving on to Paul's mix feedback. Yes, we have successfully done what we set out to achieve on a weekly basis, which is to come at this from polar opposite perspectives.
Correct, yeah.
I had reference to the reference mix and then heard the master later. Paul had heard the master and then the reference mix later. What Paul's done here, you've done a Paul Third special and you've made everything wider than the track and everything deeper. And my first two reactions were, one, there's a lot of low-mid information going on. It felt warmer, which I liked. But I did feel the low-mids were a bit stuffy and a little suffocating. And I wanted a bit more clarity or space to kind of brighten things up a bit. But again, compared to mine, that's how we're hearing things differently.
Yeah.
The other thing was I felt like there was a lot of reverb in it.
Okay.
Which it wasn't quite your Wembley Stadium debut, but it was. I don't feel like there's that much reverb in pop tracks, particularly if you listen to a lot of Spike stuff. They're so dry, some of the tracks. Yeah. But what you achieve with that is the depth that is clearly a mission for you at the moment, which I totally understand, and I think you've achieved that remarkably well. Question on depth and width: how much mix boss did you use?
I can't even remember. I just, what I do is I mix into it like Jason Joshua's God Particle. So I don't use God Particle anymore. So I go through Mixbox using his dynamic multiband thing. And then when I'm like 90% done with the mix, then I go and then I play with the depth and I play with the width. But I didn't use the depth on this one. I just used the width on this one because I'd already created depth in it. So it was just the width that I had on this. And yes, I did the balance to wherever I thought. So what I do is I just have the mix and I go, right, can I improve this? And I just take his control knob and I just go, right, about there. And then I do the last 10% of the mixing through that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I kind of did there.
Okay, interesting. Vocal sound, obviously good. Bass-wise, yes, you took that in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
Took it away from being maybe the key focus. I think what you did was you balanced and controlled everything almost uniformly. You've got this remarkable ability to do that. And I don't know if it's just hyper attention to detail of everything has its space in the stereo field and everything has its matched level. And you do this now and I'm like, how the hell does he do it? It's a remarkable skill, and I it's not something I have the patience for, clearly, but it's definitely something you do well and better than I do. However, as a result, I feel like that does stifle the energy.
Yeah, I agree with you.
There's a word that's come up a few times I've tried to avoid, but I may need to use it here hesitantly because I don't know if this is the reason. Over-processing comes up a lot. But and by over-processing in this context, I think because the dynamics are so well controlled, it's across the stereo field, it's almost like your mix comes at you like flat, like that. Whereas mine's very much, okay, there's the you know where the center is.
Yeah.
It's just different approaches. I mean, I like what you've done with it. I think it works. The main thing that bothered me was it just felt slightly stuffy, but I think because you've not got the kick clickiness coming through.
Yeah, as soon as I heard your kick, I was like, that's how I should have had my kick. Like that was annoying because I know now I could go back to that, reference your kick, and I would, because I'm good at that. I can kind of copy things, but I know I'd be able to try and recreate whatever kick sound you've got, because that there for me is the kick sound for that track. Like fucking Chef Kiss nailed it. But I think for me, one thing that's been sticking out a lot, again, because Emra is a close mentor of mine, is he's always talking about separation. Whenever he listens to any mix, he's always talking about separation. He's like, I should be able to pick like certain things out, but they shouldn't distract me. And so that's like one thing when I listen to my mix compared to yours is I can pinpoint where things are. Like there's that kind of like machine gun snare. There's those like those high kind of perks. There's a hi-hat sitting there, but I purposely put the depth back a little bit. You know what I mean? I kind of, even like a lot of the, again, when I stuck it on the Discord, one of the guys on the Discord, he was like, I love the imaging, because there's certain parts that are really nice in the imaging, especially at the start. They've got kind of the vocals naturally like jumping. Yeah. But in my mix, I just managed to get them kind of separated. But in terms of like processing, again, I'm being honest, I didn't do as much as you think. Maybe I'm doing like a bit of heavy lifting with one plugin, but like kick shaper, bass shaper, detroubler was used on a few things. It's another one of Emra's plugins. But I use that as a demudder because it's to the Bark scale, and if you get into it, it's a whole thing. But what I love about it is just like, again, one knob, and you can select like certain terms. It'll be like boomy, muddy, honky, harsh, sizzle. And you just dynamically take that out. And it works different from Soothe, and it just works from me. It's one dial, and you can sit and choose which parts of the spectrum.
I've not tried this plugin yet.
Yeah, so there were certain elements for me that maybe, I kind of feel like maybe I've went too balanced. That was one worry I had, because I did this mix on the ARIA Organics. So I was going back to them. But I know the ARIA Organics. I've mixed on them. I know the Translate. And again, I said to Emra, what do you think? And he was like, yeah, it translates, bro. But what Emra had said to me was, he went, you've got the bass nice and wide. I really like what you've done there, but I just feel like it's too wide. And when I listened to Ed's, I was like, right, there needs to be a middle ground between mine and Ed's. I think if
what a surprise.
Yeah, but I think if me and you met in the middle with the bass, because I feel like your bass is maybe a bit too monocentric, and that's what's that's kind of stifling these kind of claps that should be kind of sitting here in the trigger snare, and like certain parts that are sitting here in the mix around the vocal. I kind of feel like the bass should be wider. And I do hear that in the ref mix and the master and stuff. I do hear they have widened the bass. And that's why I struggled with it so much, because it was taking up so much energy in the track. And I kind of felt that it was either, so again, this is a win and a losing battle. If I would have had the bass more prominent, then I lose that separation, and all the other instruments can't take place. But again, is it one of these mixes like what Ed's done, where Ed's went, right, this mix isn't about all the kind of, right, let's pick that out and let's be able to hear that. It's about full-on intention, which is, I need you to dance to it, and I need you to move to it, and I need you to groove to it. But then what was hard for me is that when I listened to the master and the ref, I was still hearing them. I was still hearing these elements. So I was like, right, this is what I find difficult with some productions that aren't that busy, because it wasn't that busy. There wasn't that many fucking tracks in it.
There's not that many parts, but there's a lot going on the parts that are there that come in and out.
Yeah, so I kind of felt like when I was listening to them, they still wanted these parts to come in. You know what I mean? But I kind of feel like I feel like this is the first mix Ed's done where it's for me, it's a very Spike Stentish a little bit, where you've been more forceful with your contrast. So it's like, again, the vocals where it's like dum 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 bum 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 bum. You've made them like, right, no, you're coming in now, and you're going to come in and you're going to sit right here. I could hear bits like that. Where what I've done is I've went, no, it's balanced. So one thing I do know I've done well, and I know for a fact I have balanced that track. Whether I've balanced it at the detriment of like the overall energy, I don't know. Like if Mannequin would have mixed that, I guarantee I probably would have been closer to maybe what Ed had, because Manny is all about aggression, he's all about feel, he's all about getting that kind of aggression in the mix. Where for me, I just felt like, right, let's get it balanced and let's see how we go from there. Because what I was scared of was that if I went too far, and again, I was only hitting like -10 or whatever, lofts, I can't remember what it turned out at. But I was like, right, I need it to be clean. And, you know, I did distort a few things, like that machine gun snare, that. Again, I distorted that, and I took high end off it.
How did you distort that?
I just used the Studio One. I just went Studio One. I've got this distortion plugin, but what I didn't want I wanted it to still sit behind the vocal. So again, as much as I hate aliasing, I've always told people, if you want analog emulations to sound analog, it cannot have aliasing in it, because that's not the sound of it. But if you want a distorted sound that's going to smear your transients and sit something further back, then you use an aliasing saturator, which is what I did on that trigger snare. So it was giving me, I call it a trigger snare instead of machine gun snare, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
But what that did was that it gave it a little bit more kind of energy, spread it out, but still allowed it to sit back. I think the biggest thing that you hear in my mix is how I have focused so much on getting the vocal to sit out on its own, because that is something that I've always done, because I always listen to the vocal. Perhaps this isn't a mix, because it's like an EDM mix, that, you know, is it wrong to give the vocal so much space and make the lyrics so clear? Because, you know, it's kind of more of a vibe, is it? I'd say Ed's went for more of a vibe, and I just tried to give everything its space, balance it, and ensure that vocal. Because I think what the difference is between mine and yours is that my vocal is more audible and it has a little bit more clarity in there, where your vocal has more energy, it pokes out, it wants to sit forward. Again, your mix has got that aggressive nature where it comes at you, where I kind of feel like you look in, you need to, like, here's a good analogy. My mix, you have to lean into. Your mix, you have to lean back. Your mix jumps out at you. My one wants to sit further back and kind of surround you a little bit. And I think the two of those approaches have both their merits. They're just, all comes down to taste. That's, you know, what I would say.
So that's an interesting comparison and analogy, and we're obviously going to disagree on that in terms of what's right. I just feel like this is such a club-oriented track.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be that punchy, in-your-face, get people dancing, all the wishy-washy stuff. I mean, a lot of stuff in clubs is in mono anyway. You might have a stereo front set either side of the DJ booth, and then the house speakers are all in mono. So it is about getting that punch, and once you're in mono, you're losing the immersiveness.
True, but I do think that, honestly, if you were just to get your snare to just be a little bit more wider, you would get that claps in. Because I think what I did better was I got the claps to be more audible, and they kind of have their space. Where you've got like kick, low end, claps, kick, low end, claps, where it's like your claps trying to like, it's almost like it's a barrier. It's like your bass is so prominent and it's got so much like the upper mid range in it, where it's almost like the claps got like a little gate it can get through. And it's like maybe you past 1-2K, and it's like the claps trying to just get past that gate, where I feel like in mine, because I've widened the bass, which I think is too much. That's what Emma said to me. He's like, I think you just widened the bass too much, and I want a little bit more top end in the claps. I went, apart from that, Paul, that's all I would change. But I do think if you got your claps to have a little bit more separation, you would have even better energy. I just feel like they're getting maybe tucked a little bit because the bass is like so aggressive and so forward, but not in a bad, it's not like it's turned it into a bad mix. It's just that you've really went, right, I'm going to take your bass and I'm going to make that like the lead vocal in a sense, you know what I mean? It's kind of like the way it is, like the bass in your mix is the star, but I've tried to make, but again, that's just me. I've got this thing about vocals that I'm always like, right, no, like what's the point in having the vocal if I can't really hear the lyrics clearly and stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's a feel thing, because the bass in that track is kind of the groove.
No, I agree with you.
And that I just lean towards that. I can't help it.
But that's, I think this one will be interesting this week, because at the end of the day, I know that I've still got, if I listen to the ref, I do, well, here's a good question. Do you feel that the rough, has more energy than my mix? Do you think like that has, because it's more forward and I've added more depth, do you think that the ref has overall still more energy than what I've done?
Yes.
Right, okay. It's interesting. So, yeah, well, this one will be fascinating to get the artist's feedback, because I'll learn a lot from this, because, you know, they might turn around and be like, you know what, Paul, you just didn't give me the aggressiveness that I wanted. They might say, Paul, I love the balance that you've got, and it's fucking impressive how you've managed to get all these elements.
The thing is, we can't second guess. He might come in and be like, crikey, the mix we released is rubbish. I want to re-release Paul's, you know.
I know what you mean.
We never know. It's how long's a piece of string, and which end of it do you want to guess at which we're going to arrive at?
Yeah,
That's
but I
what
think,
we've learned
but I do think what's good, Ed, is that me and you are very confident in our intentions. We know the sound that we want to go for, and you know, if the client comes back and is like, no, I want it to be more like this, and prioritise that and that. We've got the skill set in the ear, but it's just a case of going, oh, is that what you want? Okay, fair enough. That's what I'm going to do. But I think what we need to be proud of is that we are getting to a point where we do have a sound and we do have an intention, and we can get that intention without completely fucking up the mix. We're not making bad mixes. Those two aren't bad mixes. I'll stand by that fucking mix that I've done there. Maybe it's not to the fucking, you know, it's not to an EDM guys, like again, somebody that's in EDM, somebody that lives and breathes it might go, Ed absolutely fucking nailed that. A drummer needs to fucking mix that, you know what I mean? Whether somebody that's got a bit of feel and a bit of groove and a bit of intention in there. Again,
but an EDM specialist is going to come in and say, right, you've both done X, Y, good.
Yeah, totally,
both done
100%.
A, B, bad. A, B, bad.
A, B, bad.
So how are you feeling following our comment that mixing EDM is easy compared to country music?
I know. No, it's funny because it's like it doesn't take me as much time. Like I feel like I take more time.
It was a much quicker mix, yeah.
It was, yeah, and it was because it was a good production. But again, it was still difficult because I had to recreate fucking reverbs, and I had to like try and recreate a bass sound that I was like, what's going on there? Like honestly, like I went to town on that bass because I just got to a point when I was like, right, I don't know what is going on here. I'm just going to do what I think is going to sit best with this track. So like I added a chorus to it. So there's a certain chorus I used that intentionally like does this thing where it can take anything mono and just make it stereo. So I added a little bit of chorus to it. I'm pretty sure it was chorus. And then I added a shit ton of saturation. I distorted the shit out of that bass in Bass Shaper because I could hear that they added distortion to it. But whatever that whooshy sound in the bass was, I didn't know. So I was like, right, let's give...
I wondered if it was a flange on a parallel or something.
Yeah, it was something. So I was just like, right, okay, I could hear it's distorted. Let's give it energy. So I went, right, bang. Like Bass Shaper, I took his fucking Emerald saturation or whatever colour it is, bang. I think I was about to went fucking, full whack with it. But what I find is that when I listen on my MacBook, that distortion works, where I kind of feel like it adds, a little bit of upper energy, which allows it to translate on smaller speakers. So I'm quite happy with the way that the bass sounds on like phone speakers and laptop speakers. I feel like it translates pretty well. But yeah, my bass just isn't as... Again, my bass is like, no, I don't want this to be, the main thing that the song revolves around. It's a song, so I'm going to allow you to hear everything that you've given me. There's everything you gave me on a plate, balanced. Now tell me what you want. Where you've went, no, this is like what I think your intention is, this is what I think my intention is, and you've given it, an Ed Thorne thwack. You've just went, no, bang, there, what do you think of that? Where I'd say my mix is safer. Many people would be like, oh, Paul's kind of done this and that. It's not like I've sweated it, it's just what I do and how I hear mixes. That's my natural sound. It's just like, that's me playing safe. That's me playing to what I know and what I think works well. Me going down an Ed approach would be like me working a little bit out of my comfort zone because I'm trying to do something that doesn't naturally sound right to me.
Yeah, just as if I was trying to replicate a Paul third mix, I'd be very much out of my comfort zone. I was like, what do you mean I'm keeping all the kick and the snare down in there? Everything's wider than the mono. I think what we've done is two good mixes that we can both stand by. What I find interesting is how compared to where we were so close in the middle with Marv's, we've gone back in our own respective directions, which I quite like. Because
I like it.
We are embracing the fact that you're Paul Third, I'm Ed Thorne. We both have different sounds, and although we've tried in different mixes to meet in the middle, which we know we can do when the brief is there to be honour the rough a lot more accurately, but we each have our own idiosyncrasies and ways of hearing things, and it's always a good talking point. I think that's what makes this process interesting for the viewers. So,
and it'll be interesting to hear what the clients have to say about it, because the mix has already been done, it's been mastered and it's been released, so it'll be interesting to get their feedback on it and then to see what me and Ed do differently. I swear to God, see if this is another week where like the client goes, see, to be honest with you, I prefer Ed's. Actually, Ed, just bring the hi-hats down to dB. Paul, and I've got to fucking put it at the park again. I'll be like, fuck's sake.
Well, if you do pull it out of the park, great, but there's no mix to win on this one. This one has already been heard by millions of people.
This is just pride.
Typical. Yeah, there's no gig at stake here.
Yeah.
It is just a learning curve, of which there will be many lessons to be learned next week, I'm sure, when we get Bobby Bonev, or I Am Mason Blue, as he's known on Instagram, from Sonictron, who's produced this track, on the show next week. I'm looking forward to that. Stick around, subscribe and like this episode if you haven't done already. Please give us a review on Apple Music Podcasts or wherever you find these wonderful podcasts. Thanks to DistroKid for facilitating us doing this regularly. And thank you to you guys for tuning in and listening. And we will appreciate your comments. Please let us know what you are listening on.
Yes, always. Yep.
It's been emotional. See you soon.